Be me 27, call me Hugh. I work in tech support for some soulless megacorp. You know the drill. My entire day is a loop of, have you tried turning it off and on again? I'm basically a human tranquilizer dart for angry people whose printers don't work. It pays the bills. It's fine. I live a pretty quiet life. Video games, building PCs, going to the gym when I'm not feeling lazy. Then there's Tammy. We've known each other since college. Must be close to a decade now. Back then, she was just passionate, energetic, always debating something in the student union. Now, that energy has been laser-focused into an online persona. Her social media is a minefield of buzzwords: patriarchy, toxic masculinity, emotional labor, gaslighting. You name it, she's an expert on it. In real life, she works part-time at a bookstore. Most of her personality is curated for an audience of online followers who all think the exact same way she does. Our friendship has, over the years, morphed into a very specific routine. It's my unofficial second job, the one I don't get paid for. It usually starts late. I'll be winding down, maybe watching some documentary, or trying to beat a boss in a game I'm stuck on. My phone will light up. It's always her. It's never a, "Hey, how are you?" text. It's always a call. She needs an immediate audience. I remember one night, I think it was a Tuesday a couple of months back, a perfect example. I'm in the middle of a really quiet, peaceful evening, the kind you look forward to after a long day of dealing with people's manufactured emergencies, phone buzzes. It's Tammy. I let out a sigh. Not an angry one, just a tired one. The kind of sigh that says, "Okay, here we go." I pick up. The first thing I hear is not hello, but the sound of her crying, or at least trying to. It's that dramatic, shaky breath kind of crying. Before I can even ask what's wrong, the monologue begins. It was about her boyfriend at the time. Let's call him Brad, because he was that type. Tattoos, motorcycle, perpetually unemployed, but finding himself. The source of 90% of her phone calls to me. This particular crisis was because she posted a long, elaborate story on her Instagram. It was a multi-part series of text screenshots and selfies about the daily struggles of being a woman in a patriarchal society. Brad had watched the entire story. The little icon said so, but he didn't reply to it. He didn't send a message saying, "Wow, that's so insightful," or "You're so strong." Nothing. To Tammy, this was an act of profound violence. She explained to me, in agonizing detail, how his silence was a form of passive aggression, how it was his way of invalidating her lived experience. She said it was a classic example of how men are taught to suppress emotional engagement, which makes them poor partners. I'm on the other end of the line listening to this. My monitor is on, showing the schematics for a new water cooling loop I was planning. I'm just nodding, saying, "Yeah," and "I see," and "That's rough," into the void. My job is to validate, to be the sounding board, to provide the emotional reaction that Brad failed to provide. The call went on for 47 minutes. I checked. She cried, she got angry, she deconstructed his entire personality based on this one non-action. She concluded that he was probably a secret misogynist who was intimidated by her strength. Finally, she seemed to run out of steam. She let out a big, theatrical sigh and said, "Thanks for listening, Hugh. You're the only one who gets it." She never once asked how I was doing or what I was up to. The call ended. I just sat there in silence for a few minutes. Then I went back to planning my water-cooling loop. The next morning, I was scrolling through social media while my coffee brewed. I saw a new post from Tammy. It was a picture of a sunset with text overlaid on it. The text read, "A reminder to all my strong women. Do not perform unpaid emotional labor for men. Your energy is a precious resource. You are not his mother, his sister, or his therapist. Let them learn to deal with their own feelings." It had over 200 likes. All her friends were in the comments. Yas queen, and so true, and this is the message we all need. I just stared at the post. The irony was so thick I could feel it in the room. I had literally just clocked out of a 47-minute emotional labor shift for her less than 12 hours ago. But I didn't say anything. I just sipped my coffee and went to work. This was the pattern. A week later, Brad did something else. I think he liked another girl's photo on social media. Cue another late-night call. Another therapy session where I had to listen to her analyze the deep-seated psychological meaning behind a casual double tap on a screen. She insisted it was a micro-cheating event, that it was a manifestation of men's inability to be satisfied with one partner because of how society conditions them. I suggested maybe he just thought it was a nice photo. That was a mistake. She got defensive. She asked me why I was always taking the man's side. She said I had internalized misogyny that I needed to unpack. I learned my lesson. From then on, I just agreed. Yeah, you're right. Totally unacceptable. He should have known better. It was easier. It was like handling a difficult customer at work. Find the path of least resistance. Agree, validate, de-escalate, end call. It wasn't just Brad, though. It was everything. One time she called me furious because a male cashier at the grocery store told her to have a nice day. Apparently, he said it in a tone she interpreted as condescending. She spent 20 minutes explaining how this was a microaggression, how men in service positions often use feigned politeness to assert dominance over female customers. I just listened. I didn't tell her that my job is literally to be politely condescending to people all day long, regardless of their gender. I didn't tell her that the guy was probably just a tired cashier who wanted his shift to end. I just said, wow, that's messed up. There were times, very rarely, when I tried to turn the conversation around. I remember one day my boss had completely ripped into me for something that wasn't my fault. A whole server rack went down because another department messed up a software patch. I was the one on the phone with the client, so I got all the heat. I was feeling pretty down that evening. Tammy called, as usual, to talk about some fight she'd had with Brad. After she vented for about 15 minutes, there was a brief pause. I decided to jump in. Hey, I get it. I had a really brutal day at work myself. I started to explain what happened with my boss and the server rack. I got about 2 sentences in. Yeah, that sounds annoying. She cut me off. But is it as bad as being systematically silenced in your relationship? Your boss is just a workplace issue. This is about my fundamental worth as a person. And just like that, the conversation was back on her. My bad day at work was just an annoying little thing. Her drama with her boyfriend was an existential crisis of epic proportions. I just shut down. Yeah, you're right, I said. Tell me more about what he did. And she did, for another half an hour. Looking back, I don't know why I kept answering the phone. I guess a part of me still thought we were friends, that this was just a phase she was going through. I held on to the memory of the friend she used to be in college, the one who would actually ask about my life, the one who would listen. But that version of her was long gone, replaced by this caricature who saw every interaction through a single warped lens, a world where she was the perpetual victim and everyone else, especially men, was a potential antagonist. Except for me, of course. I wasn't a man. I was a utility. I was her designated emotional support system, a 24/7 hotline for her feelings. The hypocrisy became more and more glaring. She'd post on social media about how women are not rehabilitation centers for broken men. Then she'd call me to try and fix Brad, asking me to analyze his texts and tell her what she should say to him. She'd tweet about how men need to build stronger support networks with other men and stop relying on women. Then she'd call me, her male friend, because her female friends were apparently too busy to listen to her complain for the 5th time that week about the same guy. I saw her friends' comments online. They were all about "yes" and "spill the tea." But I suspect that when it came to a 45-minute phone call at 11 p.m., they suddenly had other plans. So, that duty fell to me, the reliable one. Good old Hugh. He'll always pick up. The dynamic was solidified. I was the free therapist, and she was the patient who would never get better, because she didn't want to. She thrived on the drama. It was the fuel for her online identity. Without a crisis, what would she post about? Without a villain, how could she be the hero of her own story? So Brad would mess up, she'd get her story, I'd be the ghostwriter for her feelings, and the cycle would repeat. I was becoming increasingly numb to it all. During her calls, my mind would just drift. I'd be thinking about code, or what to make for dinner the next day, or a movie I wanted to see. I had a whole set of automated responses. That's crazy. I can't believe he did that. You deserve so much better. It was like running a script. My job at the tech company was bleeding into my personal life. I was providing technical support for a person whose emotional hardware was permanently faulty, and there were no replacement parts. I just started feeling tired. A deep bone-weary exhaustion every time my phone buzzed with her name. I started thinking about just not answering, letting it go to voicemail. But then I'd feel a pang of guilt. What if this time it was serious? What if she actually needed real help? That's how they keep you on the hook. That little bit of doubt, that little sliver of loyalty to a person who no longer exists. The final few weeks before everything changed were particularly bad. Her and Brad were in a death spiral. The calls were happening almost every night. Each one was more frantic than the last. He wasn't texting back fast enough. He was being emotionally distant. He wanted a guy's night, which she was convinced was code for something nefarious. She wanted me to help her draft texts to him. She'd read me a message she was thinking of sending, and I was supposed to critique it. Does this sound too needy? Or does it sound like I'm setting a firm boundary? I'm a tech support guy. I fix firewalls. Now I was a relationship diplomat and a crisis negotiator. It was draining the life out of me. My own life was starting to feel gray and muted. My patience, which I get paid to have in abundance at my job, was running on fumes. I was just going through the motions. Work, gym, game, Tammy call, sleep, repeat. I was becoming a background character in her drama, an NPC who existed only to give the main character a specific dialogue option. I think I knew, somewhere deep down, that this couldn't last. Something had to give. A system under that much constant, one-sided pressure is bound to fail. I just didn't realize how spectacular that failure would be. It started, as these things often do, on a perfectly normal day. I went to work, dealt with my usual queue of tickets. I came home, cooked some food, and sat down to relax. I was actually feeling okay. It had been almost 48 hours since the last crisis call. A new record. I was starting to hope that maybe, just maybe, she and Brad had finally sorted things out, or broken up. Either would have been a relief. But the universe has a funny sense of humor. The calm was just the deep breath before the plunge. That evening, 2 things happened that would change everything. The first was a call, but it wasn't from Tammy. It was from my father. We don't talk on the phone much, usually just text. A call meant something was up. My stomach dropped a little when I saw his name. His voice was strained. He told me my mom had had a fall. She was in the hospital. They were running tests, but it might be serious. He didn't have many details. He just sounded scared. I felt the floor drop out from under me. My mom is my rock, the most stoic, unshakable person I know. The thought of her being hurt and vulnerable was shattering. I told my dad I'd be on the first flight out in the morning. We hung up, and I just sat there, frozen. The quiet of my apartment felt immense and deafening. My mind was racing with a million worst-case scenarios. Just then, my boss from work sent a mass email. The subject line was urgent, upcoming department restructuring. My heart sank even further. That's corporate speak for layoffs are coming. The email was vague, talking about increasing efficiency and synergizing our workflow. But we all knew what it meant. Our department had been underperforming for a while. My job, my only source of income, was suddenly on thin ice. So, there I was. In the span of about 15 minutes, my entire world had been destabilized. My mother was in the hospital. My job was about to disappear. I felt a pressure in my chest I hadn't felt in years. I was completely and utterly overwhelmed. I needed to talk to someone. I needed a friend. And in that moment of pure panic, my brain defaulted to its old programming. My thumb hovered over Tammy's name in my contacts. For years, I had been her emergency service. I thought, foolishly, that it was a two-way street. I thought that after all the hours I had spent listening to her, she would have one moment to listen to me. It was a fatal miscalculation, the single biggest mistake I ever made in that friendship. I took a deep breath, and I made the call. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was energetic, almost cheerful. "Oh, hey, perfect timing. You are not going to believe what Brad just did." I could hear the smile in her voice. She was excited. She had fresh drama to dissect. I took a breath to steady myself. "Tammy, wait," I said. My voice was quieter than I expected. Can you just listen for a minute? Something's happened." The shift in her tone was immediate. Her cheerful energy evaporated, replaced by a sigh of impatience. "Okay, what is it?" she asked. It was the voice of someone waiting for the boring prelude to be over so the main event could start. I told her everything. I told her about the email from my boss, the threat of layoffs, the anxiety of not knowing if I'd have a job next month. My voice started to shake a little when I talked about my mom. I told her about the fall, the hospital, the fear in my dad's voice. I laid it all out. The two biggest pillars of my life, my family, and my financial stability, were crumbling at the same time. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. For a stupid, hopeful second, I thought she was processing it. I thought she was trying to find the right words of comfort. I was wrong. She finally spoke, and her voice was condescendingly calm, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to a difficult child. "Okay, Hugh, I hear that you're stressed," she began. "But let's try to look at this with a bit of perspective, shall we?" I didn't say anything. "First, the job thing," she continued, her voice gaining a lecturing tone. "You're a man in the tech industry. That's like playing life on easy mode. You have so much privilege in that space. Even if you do get laid off, which you probably won't, you'll find another job in a week. It's not a systemic issue. It's a temporary inconvenience for you." I felt a cold knot forming in my stomach. And the thing with your mom, I'm sorry she fell, obviously, but men's feelings about their parents are often tied up in patriarchal expectations of being the protector. Your stress is probably more about your own ego than her actual health. She's in a hospital with doctors. She's getting professional care. She paused, as if to let her profound wisdom sink in. "Now, can I please tell you about my actual problem? Because, unlike yours, mine is about ongoing emotional abuse and the psychological toll of being in a relationship with a classic narcissist." Something inside me just broke. It wasn't a loud crack. It was a quiet, clean snap, like a circuit breaker flipping in my brain. All the years of her hypocrisy, all the one-sided conversations, all the ignored texts and interrupted stories, it all coalesced into a single moment of absolute clarity. I saw the whole dynamic for what it was. I wasn't her friend. I was a free utility she used to regulate her own emotions. My problems weren't real. They were inconveniences. Her boyfriend not texting her back was an existential crisis. My mom in the hospital was a footnote. My voice, when I finally spoke, didn't sound like my own. It was flat, devoid of any emotion. It was my work voice, the one I use when a customer is being unreasonable, and I'm about to terminate the call. "Tammy?" "Yes? Are you ready to listen now?" she asked, a hint of victory in her voice. "No," I said. "I'm done listening." The line went quiet again. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked, her voice turning defensive. "For years," I said, each word deliberate and measured, "I have been providing you with unpaid emotional labor. I've been your on-call therapist, your crisis hotline, and your personal validation service." I could hear her trying to interject, but I kept talking. "You tweet about how women shouldn't have to do that for men. Turns out the sentiment doesn't go both ways." "That's not fair," she stammered. "We're friends. Friends support each other." "No," I said calmly. "Friends support each other. That implies a two-way exchange. This has never been a two-way exchange. This is a user and service provider relationship, and I am officially decommissioning my service." Her voice started to rise, getting shrill. "You're twisting my words. You're being manipulative. This is classic toxic masculinity. You can't handle real emotions, so you shut down and attack me." I almost laughed. She was running her script, throwing every buzzword she had at me. But it had no effect anymore. The spell was broken. "My mother is in the hospital, and I might lose my job," I said, my voice still perfectly flat. "And you called my problems an inconvenience. You don't get to talk to me about toxicity." I took a small breath. It was time for the final log-off. "I am not your free therapist anymore, Tammy. My shift is over, permanently. If you need someone to listen to your problems about Brad, find a professional and pay them for their time." And then I hung up. My thumb, which had been hovering over the end call button, felt strangely light. My phone immediately lit up with a wall of text from her. I didn't read it. I just held down my finger on her contact name. Block. Then I went to my social media apps, one by one. Facebook, blocked. Twitter, blocked. Instagram, blocked. A complete and total system purge. Then I sat back on my couch. The silence in the apartment was different this time. It wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The first few days were strange. I kept expecting my phone to ring late at night. A part of my brain was still wired for the crisis alert. But it never came. The silence held, and with each passing day, a weight I didn't even realize I was carrying started to lift. It was incredible. I had so much more mental energy. My evenings were my own again. I flew home and spent a week with my family. My mom's condition was serious, but she was stable. She was a fighter. Being there, actually being present with my dad and sister, without a phone buzzing in my pocket with some manufactured crisis, felt right. When I got back, the layoffs at work happened. My name wasn't on the list. I was safe. But the whole experience had been a wake-up call. Instead of just being relieved, I used that newfound energy to do something for myself. I signed up for an online certification course in network security, something I'd been putting off for years. I started going to the gym more consistently, not to look a certain way, but just because it felt good to burn off stress. My life started to feel mine. About a month after the last call, I heard through a mutual acquaintance what happened with Tammy. Brad had predictably broken up with her. Apparently, he did it via text, the ultimate crime in her book. I can only imagine the meltdown that followed. According to the acquaintance, she had tried to call me dozens of times. When she realized I had blocked her, she panicked. She turned to her online support system, her army of feminist friends who always liked her posts. She called one of them, crying, to vent about Brad. The friend listened for about 3 minutes before saying, "Oh, that's awful. Hey, I gotta run. My new episode of that show just dropped. But you're a strong woman. You'll get through it." And hung up. She tried another friend. This one gave her a bunch of generic empowerment slogans like, "You don't need a man to be happy," and then said she was busy with a yoga class. It turned out that her community was great at hitting the like button, but they had zero interest in actually doing the heavy lifting of a real friendship. They didn't want to be on the phone for an hour at 11 p.m. listening to someone cry. That was my job, and the position was no longer filled. She was left completely alone with her feelings for the first time in years. With no one to validate her outrage, it just fizzled out. She had no audience. The drama had no purpose. I didn't feel happy hearing this, but I didn't feel bad either. I just felt nothing. It was like hearing a weather report from a city I no longer lived in. A few more months passed. I finished my certification course and got a promotion at work with a significant raise. I was feeling good. I was focused. One afternoon, I think it was a Saturday, I was at a coffee shop working on a personal project on my laptop. The place was busy. I was meeting up with a colleague, a woman from the networking team, to brainstorm some ideas. We were just chatting, laughing about some stupid office drama. It was a normal, easy conversation, a two-way street. Then the door opened, and Tammy walked in. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked dull. Her hair was messy. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her clothes were rumpled. The vibrant, loud persona was gone. She just looked tired and small. She saw me. Her eyes widened. She froze for a second. She saw me smiling, talking with another woman, looking happy and relaxed. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Shock, hurt, maybe even regret. She looked like she wanted to say something. She took a half step forward. Then she stopped. She just turned around and walked out of the coffee shop. I watched her go. My colleague asked if I was okay. "Yeah," I said, turning back to her. "Just fine." And I meant it. That night, out of some weird, morbid curiosity, I used a friend's phone to look at her social media. I was still blocked on my own. Her feed was different. The aggressive, angry posts were gone. They'd been replaced by vague, sad ones. Pictures of rainy windows and empty coffee cups. The last one, posted that afternoon, was a simple text image. It said, "It's a strange feeling when you realize you have no one to talk to." It had 2 likes, no comments. I handed my friend his phone back. I went to bed feeling nothing but a profound sense of peace. The user had finally learned that their system was incompatible with my hardware. The problem was resolved. The ticket was closed.